So before we begin, I want to have us all kind of check in with ourselves with regards to this topic. This topic is very challenging. It's not easy. I think all of us feel sometimes very defeated as parents. And it's really important for us to recognize a couple of things, right? Like what we bring into the space when we are addressing some of these challenges with our kids. So even in this space, I'm asking if you can, please go ahead and use the chat. And I'm going to ask that you please tell us which quote of the three is represents or resonates the most with you at this point in time. These quotes help us sometimes just laugh because some of you may have seen some of these already. They're from Instagram or from social media in general. Thank you so much for sharing where you're at. I know that it's hard to think about what our kids are up to when we're not there with them, and it's also what we think about what's going on with them and with ourselves and our relationship with our kids. And it's hard. We want to be number two, right? That we know that that adolescence is not about letting go; it's about hanging on during a bumpy ride, which is we're going to kind of talk a little bit more about that. And so many times the lens that we're wearing is it can be jaded if we're having a bad day, or it can be, it can feel like really challenging to connect with our kids. So stress is really, our world is very stressful in general. And so it's a reality for many of us. So I hope that this helps you in some way feel like, and we're going to, in the next slide, talk a little more about what is the reality of what our kids are doing with on screens. So I appreciate all of you for keeping your mind and your heart open during the next hour. So what we know, or at least what CDC has reported, is that kids are actually, so obviously the 0 to 7 category, or 0 to 4, we don't really have a lot of data of what's the actual reported data. It's unreported at this point. But we know that when they get to about 8 to 10 years old, they're averaging about 6 hours per day. And what is this data telling us, right? Because at that point, it's 6 hours, then it increases tremendously, right? Like almost a third more into the 11 to 14-year-old category. And that being the highest averaging group, let's stop and think about what is it that's happening at that point in time, right? There's physical changes that are happening, emotional changes, things are awkward at school or awkward with their body. Phones are usually given, phones are usually given at that point in time. And many times they, because they're in middle school, they want to be cool like their friends. Then they use that to socialize, maybe because it's awkward or hard to be in front of someone in person, and it's easier on the phone, right? So they're spending a lot of time. But I want you to look at the number that's in parentheses next to that average, which was really mind-blowing to me, because even as I was looking at this data, when you consider how many days of the year that time represents, it's pretty significant, right? When we're talking about 92 days a year, and even at the highest point, 137 days per year, which is almost like that's so much time that's spent, right? It's a little more than a third of the year is spent on social media or on their phone or on a screen or device. So we definitely want to, we've all seen this information of the 1 to 2 hours, right? I don't want us to focus so much on that, because sometimes I think that in and of itself can feel like, oh my God, I'm not doing my job as a parent. I'm so far from that. And maybe some of you have figured out the secret to doing this, right? And you're here just to listen and to learn more about monitoring and a little more about what's going on with the screens and our teens. But for those of you that are here really wanting to learn more information about how do we get to, from the right column into the left, right? Or at least as close as we can for your family. And that's gonna, hopefully some of the information we're gonna talk about will help you with that. So again, in the chat, I would like for you to please tell us your child's age and how many hours they're spending. And I want you to think about First of all, I am the only one, along with maybe Marie, seeing the chat. So be sure to know that your name will not be shared and will not be shared on the recording either. But this is really meant so that I can at least share with everyone how many hours more or less are engaged. So we're getting 6 a day, 2 kids, one is 12 and one is 14. And I don't know how many hours for that person, how many hours their kids are spending, and not including time at school. So this is just time at home on the screen. Even if it is screen, we're going to differentiate too between what's the time for school and school work versus leisure. Okay. I'm seeing 2 hours during the week, 5 hours plus on the weekends for someone, a 16-year-old, and it's about 4 to 6 hours, 12-year-old, 1 to 5 hours, depending on the day. And earlier I had shared around 6 hours, and that was for a 12-year-old. And we also have an 8-year-old and 2 hours during the week, 3 to 5 on the weekend. So for some of you, I'm really happy to hear that you're kind of closer towards the middle column, right? You're not too deep into on the other end, right? Where they're spending hours and hours of their time. So I want to hopefully encourage most of you to continue doing what's working. Hopefully there's still space and they feel like they can talk to you, because we are going to talk a little more about some of the things that they're encountering that they need our support with when it comes to the social media, especially. And I think, let's see, one more. We have weekends are often less, but if I have to work on, so when we have to work, it kind of gives the kids the chance to slip in extra time on the internet, definitely. And I want to also note that, we really as parents can be hard on ourselves. And sometimes this, if it isn't this, it could be something else, grades and something else that represents how we're doing, how we're, kind of scoring ourselves as a parent. And that can be really hard on us if it's not working, right? Whatever is not working isn't working, or if it is, right? Luckily, some of you are doing things that are working for you. But I want to say that, we're here, all of us. We all have different relationships with our kids. What may work for one family may not work for another. And, for those of you that are having a harder time with managing how many hours, we want to be here to support you and to share some ideas and information. And that can include maybe a phone call with me and talking more about, individually what your family's needs are. And again, our resource, and I'll share my information at the end, is a free resource to anyone in the district. So I encourage you to reach out. So let's take a little time travel back to, I don't know, maybe 1990s. That TV looks about 1990s, maybe 2000, early 2000s. And recognize that the world looked very different for us. Many of us that were teens or were of that age using TVs. And this is what our device was, right? Maybe some of us already had a computer. Mostly, though, it was for schoolwork or things like that. But there were other options, like Amazon already existed, eBay, and I remember all of those things happening. But our TV, if that was our screen, the primary screen, it couldn't go anywhere the same way that it can for kids, right? So I chose this TV specifically because I want us to also kind of reflect on what was it like when we were on the TV for too long, or when we were having challenges with, or parents were having challenges with us, right? I think it's helpful to look back and think, what was that like? What was hard? What was helpful for our parents to share with us or help us with? And so it's really important to kind of think back on what was our experience with our parents. So again, the TV wasn't as portable. Maybe some of us had a TV in our room, right? But definitely it was mostly for watching TV or movies, and that's the one similarity. I think the kids now are also, of course, scrolling through social media, and that's screen time, meaning more leisure time, right? Playing video games, anything that's considered a leisure activity. Then screen use, and I know someone asked that question, right? Are we differentiating between schoolwork and leisure? So screen use is more of that schoolwork, right? Your school related, work related for us. Sometimes, interacting with friends and talking and communicating, reading and listening to books, all of that, anything that, we're also making plans or organizing ourselves, right? Like if we use Fitness Pal or any of the other apps that are out there that are helping us organize ourselves, right? So that's kind of considered more screen use, which is different from screen time being more leisurely and all of that. So for some of you, maybe this is your child, and I'll go ahead and read it. So if you have a 16-year-old child that is doing well in school, thriving, doing well, you don't need to do much for them except monitor what they're doing online, perhaps. Then, for them, it's easier to have their phone by their dresser and plugged in as an alarm to use it to get up and move through their day. For some of them, if you ask them, hey, can we talk? And they can put their phone down and it's easy, right? Those are the kids that perhaps are having an easier time transitioning, right? For most kids, they can. We'll talk a little bit about design and how things are designed to really hook us and the kids as well, especially. So I think it's just really important to recognize that if your child is also able to put their phone down, is able to interact and do well in talking with the family and being present, right? That then some things are okay, right? Like having their phone in their room as an alarm in the morning. But let's take for a second. This is a quick video.
About the problem that you wish to address.
Oh, okay.
Let me just go ahead and preface that. I don't know if anyone recalls this show. It is Mad TV and another throwback to the 90s. In this scene, he's speaking to his patient and let's see what happens, right? Because sometimes we just want our kids to do what we tell them to do, right? And they don't. But why not, right? Like, why can't they just stop? And so let's see this interaction for a second.
I have this fear of being buried alive in a box. I start thinking about being buried alive and I begin to panic.
Has anyone ever tried to bury you alive in a box?
No, but truly thinking about it does make my life horrible. I mean, I can't go through tunnels or be in an elevator or in a house, anything boxy.
So what you're saying is you're claustrophobic.
Yes, that's it.
All right, well, let's go, Catherine. I'm going to say two words to you right now. I want you to listen to them very, very carefully. Then I want you to take them out of the office with you and incorporate them into your life.
Well, shall I write them down?
Well, if it makes you comfortable, it's just two words. We find most people can remember them.
Okay.
You ready?
Yes.
Okay, here they are. Stop it!
I'm sorry?
Stop it!
Stop it?
Yes, S-T-O-P, new word, I-T.
So, what are you saying?
You know, it's funny. I say two simple words, and I cannot tell you the amount of people who say exactly the same thing you're saying. I mean, this is not Yiddish, Catherine. This is English. Stop it.
So, I should just stop it.
There you go. I mean, you don't want to go through life being scared of being buried alive in a box, do you? I mean, that sounds frightening.
It is.
Then stop it.
I can't. I mean, it's been with me since childhood.
No, we don't go there. Just stop it.
Right. A very ineffective conversation, right? And I just want to clarify that is not how therapy works. Obviously, this is a comedy skit. And what used to work, maybe stop it like when they were 3, right? They'd listen a little more. Sometimes it took a little convincing or just literally grabbing them away. but not when they're this age, right? When they're older, it's hard. And our brain is, and as humans, we're complex beings. And I wish that stop it would work. I wish I had a magic wand that would work, right? And this job, right, for me as a therapist would be so much easier, but unfortunately, it doesn't quite work that way. So I just wanted to lighten a little bit the mood with regards to this topic because I know it can be really challenging. So some of the kids, right, if your child isn't that 16-year-old that we just described, that they can put their phone down, they're keeping up with their grades, they're managing with school, then there's a specific group of kids that are more vulnerable to either screen addiction or screen just being hooked more to their screen. And some of the kids that I will say, we have, of course, kids that are diagnosed with ADHD or the inattentive type of ADHD as well, not just the hyper, and autism, and they're particularly considered having challenges with their screen use. And we continue to have more and more research around that. But if kids who and people are already in general having a challenge with their screen use or can easily get hooked by the design tricks that are put into like Instagram, Facebook. And I don't want to just, put them down. There are some things that they're good for, but definitely for kids who have some of these challenges or differences in their abilities, they will have and may struggle with, what we call transitions, and transitions can be something that they still struggle with at this age. And transitions meaning like being able to move from one activity to another and just being okay, so that's the type of challenge that they're facing, right? If they get into a tunnel vision playing a game, then it can be really challenging for them to get out of that, right? And so the definition of actual screen addiction, I want to just go ahead and read it to you, is a group of behaviors that are negative with negative outcomes that can happen when we use too much technology, right? During our day. And that can also include adults. So watching TV, video games, scrolling through social media, all of that, our brain can use that or sees it as like a digital drug. It functions in the same way and in our brain with all of that stimulus. And for one thing, I know that many people, there's lots of research out there. I know that there was a recent whistleblower who mentioned the Instagram and how it's known to them that the data is pretty significant around teens and being susceptible to depression and anxiety. I just want to give us a chance to think of it in a different way where we're kind of focusing more on kids who have depression or have a history or potential history of depression, or there's family history of depression. Those kids are just actually just more vulnerable and have a higher risk level of then utilizing their screen to cope or to deal with whatever they don't like about what's happening around them. So those are kind of just the present factors that just make that person or that child more susceptible to then, if they feel like depression, looking at the infographic, then they may isolate and avoid more, right? Which then they might still want to make connections somehow, and they use their phone, right? They'll use their phone during the pandemic. For many people, our phones were like our lifeline, right? But for them, it just can increase to a level that can become unhealthy, especially if there is no intervention, right, of seeing a therapist for what's going on with the depression and the anxiety, then that can just continue cycling, right? And so I will mention the screens. What they do is basically, instead of having positive social connectedness, it can create negative social connectedness, right? Which just means focusing on the phone, not really being present with the people around you, not going down to dinner when they're called that dinner's ready, and having family time. So that's really what we're trying to address by having this conversation and giving you some tools, as we'll talk about them more, to really address some of these issues. But if your child is having that you're noticing depression or anxiety in them, then I highly encourage you to seek some support either through your schools, through your insurance. I know that right now we're pretty impacted as far as availability, but we can definitely find some way to support you and your child. So we know that with the internet, there comes a big availability of what they can see and how they interact. And I know someone mentioned having their child having long distance friends, right? This is very, very common. They're meeting people who in their part of the world, right? In Australia and other parts of the world, they're awake and they're up, but maybe here it's opposite time, right? So that can also create a lot of challenges for our kids. They want to be up with their friends who are in another part of the world, and again, right, it's like, okay, you made friends, these are people you met, but who are they? What's going on? How is this helping you as a person to develop, right? And they can also stumble, not necessarily because they want to, sometimes they do stumble upon sexual content at a younger age when they're using a lot of internet, of course. And most notably, a bigger concern is sexting, or at what they call nudes. And they can either request them or be the ones that receive it, whether they want to or not, right? Whether it's consented or not. And they are spending more time online than they even desire. So one of the books that I really focused gathering information for today's topic really talks a lot about spending, that they're really aware of it, but it's hard. They're having a hard time disengaging with their screen. And there was one more thing I just wanted to mention. If there are no kids, I hope there aren't any kids listening to this, because I will say that I know most of us have some kind of parental controls at home or software or apps on their phones. Our kids are really smart. They will find a way to bypass or get around the software. I have a techie husband. He works in the tech industry. He's a developer. And he told me a simple Google search can give them a solution to try. So if they want to get around Circle, get around screen time, they can. I want to empower you with this information because I think it's important. A lot of kids now have like a credit card or green light. And even though we can see what they're doing with it, they can go in, and if they want to, if it's an open credit card that we're not monitoring, they can create their own Apple account on their phone, factory reset their phone, and then have full control of their phone again. So this is something that I'm sharing with you so that you're aware. They can also disable screen time using that same process. And most importantly, and even more tech savvy, there's a way to use VPNs, which are a virtual private network, for them to find a way to get through utilizing someone else. And even through systems like Discord, you're on someone else's screen, you can see what they're seeing. If that person has full access, the kids are also being able to see what they're seeing with full access, no restriction. So something to think about. When they have access to money, they have more access to finding workarounds. So really what you're trying to do is also really empower them to build their ethical and moral dilemma problem solving skills, right? So something to think about there. And by the way, this is the copy of the book that I gathered a lot of this information from. It's behind their screens a lot. It's basically all taken from the kids' perspective and what they want us to know. It was researchers' data collected and surveys done. And this is actually post the pandemic. So this is very current information. It was actually just released a few months ago. But in talking about the sexting culture, which, is somewhat of a sub-theme with regards to their screens, I want us to keep in mind that actually most teens are not asking, nor are they sending sexually explicit pictures, videos, or messages. So the data actually shows that it's 1 in 7 teens that has sent a sext, and 1 in 3 that has received a sext. So it's even smaller number that the biggest fear is always that their picture or video will be shared with others, and it's actually an even smaller number. 1 in 10 have forwarded on someone else's text or text that has explicit information, pictures on it. So some teens really, because they know that they're going to get in trouble, they will fear telling us, and then it can go on without getting addressed, right? Because we know, as you can see, the law is that any sex with a minor is illegal, regardless of the minor consenting. And even between two minors, it's considered illegal. So that's the law. And most of them, the majority, know this. They know that there's a risk with their stuff going out to other people that they don't want shared with necessarily. And they also know that there's a legal risk, right? Somehow, this is still not necessarily for the 1 in 7 kids who are sending a text, it's not stopping them. What is most influential, not only is our values that we try to instill in them, but it's also their social beliefs, right? So if their social circle is sending out pictures like that, is, you know, making it okay or normalizing it, then they're going to think, oh, this is normal, right? I think one of the most important quotes that I read in that book was someone like Billie Eilish. She shared that she didn't know, and this is more talking about pornography, but she didn't know that because she was early on exposed to very rough, very hardcore type of pornography, she thought that was normal. So her first experience was actually, she thought that things were normal when it was actually not normal, right? Like it was violent, it could be painful or hurtful. And that's something that no one wants for their children. And I will mention a little later about that, because I know that it's like it's either all or nothing, right? When it comes to that, but what is going to be okay? What, and that's a question that I'm not prepared nor to answer here in this space. You would have to really gather more information for yourself, for your family, for the co-parent that parents with you. And you really want to empower yourself with, how are we going to deal with, or how are we going to address this, right? When it comes to pornography, because obviously if they can get around any kind of, things like circle or screen time, they can find a way through. If they really are curious, they're going to find a way through the sites. So something to think about is that our kids really, their choices are really influenced, obviously, peer pressure. It's still, that's the number one, and making it normal, right, for them to have access or to see certain things or to share certain things with each other. So something definitely to be aware of, that knowing our kids' friends is really, really important. And most lately, we're all really concerned about what's happening when it comes to drugs, especially anything laced with fentanyl, which right now it could be anything, any drug that's out on the street, a street drug. And I did come across this information, which is also, this information in particular isn't as recent, but it's still something that we're really concerned that it's continuing to get more addressed, right? So since December 20 of 21, Instagram actually tried to remove some of the hashtags that kids are able to then utilize to find and use Instagram to purchase drugs with. So they try to eliminate, for example, hashtag Xanax or hashtag ecstasy. And unfortunately, the algorithms have kind of taken over. And so that one might be eliminated, but hashtag California hasn't, or hashtag Los Angeles, or hashtag San Fernando Valley, or hashtag Santa Monica, or Malibu, right? So all of those things have to get sorted through, and in order to really address the fact that this platform is still allowing kids to purchase through the messaging system directly from drug dealers. And it's unfortunate because it is something that was not used at the beginning. Most of us were just sharing our pictures. And unfortunately, it's come to this, which is really, really just challenging and heartbreaking that that's what's happening. But there are a lot of bad people out there, right? And so unfortunately, if our kids are wanting to experiment or curious about it, or for whatever reason they're trying to use drugs, they can utilize them through Instagram. So it's something else that we need to be aware of. So what is our mission? Our mission really, as I mentioned earlier, is to guide our kids and to have healthy tech habits to begin with, right? We're kind of addressing one thing at a time. Talking about the differences between being an active versus a passive screen viewer, right? Like if they're just on TikTok, just viewing and viewing and viewing, and it's been like 2 hours and they're still doing the same thing, looking for the next best video that makes them laugh, talking about, well, was that time that you intended to use that for that? Having those conversations, right? Versus, hey, just get off the phone, right? Which is a lot our go-to. Sometimes we just want them to get off their phone and interact with us and talk to us and tell us about their day, right? Tell us how they're doing. So it's really important for us to help them reflect on what's going on. Why is it that even if they're using screens that much, right? Like, how can we go from maybe 2 hours to let's do 1 hour of TikTok? Like, how can I help you? Do you need me to come in and maybe just not even say anything, but take your phone away, right? Anything that'll work. And we want to teach them about these tricks that are designed into the apps. Companies hire sophisticated psychologists, unfortunately, that are helping them then hook people. They don't necessarily focus necessarily on kids, but they, in general, people to then want to be on Facebook for as long as they do, or checking their Facebook, or looking for the ding and finding out who was the one sending a notification, right? Or what was the notification about? So really trying to figure out and sharing that information with them, because many times kids don't like to be tricked, right? Like that's like, oh, I don't want to be like a pawn in someone else's, game. And telling them about these things, and hopefully they're hearing it at school, hopefully they're hearing it at other places that can help really solidify that information, right, for them to remember. And then also, as they're through that process, really identifying their values. Like, no, I value hanging out with my friends more. And maybe that is someone that's on social media or that they are seeing, but they're not interacting with them in person, right? Well, then it's talking about, do you value in-person interactions, and how can we make those more of your time, right? Versus being on the phone. And talking to them about that will help them really recognize how to use this thought process, this critical thinking skills that we're trying to help them with their values, to use them for other things, right? Like, why is it that I'm not going to drink with my friends tonight, right? Or if they're offering it, I'm not going to do it because I know, right? And we want them to know what are those values, because they know whatever you're teaching them. They know that you're worried about them and you're going to be concerned, and that you love them and that you care for them, right? And sometimes through this process of trying to help them learn, there's so much discipline that they can feel disconnected to that, even though everything we do is with love, right? But if they're being told constantly, don't do this, don't do that, it can slowly make it easier to then, I'm just going to do that, right? Their rebel phase, right? So the other part is also reminding them to be patient. They're going to make mistakes. They're going to go over their time that they have decided not to go over. And it's really important just for them to think about, it's okay. That was today. Tomorrow I'm going to start over and I'm going to do better, right? And being able to do that, that's kind of a growth mindset idea and concept that can help them really grow from where they're at and not give up. And talking about the elephant in the room, right? Finding out what's going on that they are using. Is there an elephant in the room, right? Maybe they're ignoring family time or everything because something's going on at school, or they feel different and they don't know how to talk about it. Like as we talked about earlier with depression and anxiety. And maybe sometimes they are also supporting a friend in need, right? But maybe there's a need so high or so heavy for them that they need to reach out to an adult to help them with it. And keeping that channel of communication open is really key to you being able to understand what's going on, right? Maybe they're not necessarily mindlessly scrolling. They're really trying to be a supportive friend. And bringing up the topic and the conversation with them, not when you're upset or frustrated about what's happening and what you're seeing. It's going to be a time where maybe you guys are just playing around, like goofing off and like talking about something silly, and then kind of transitioning maybe into this conversation about, hey, have you ever thought about how much time we spend on our screens, on our phones? What's that like? Like, I know like if you say, I as a parent notice that I'm on it. What's that like for you, right? Like, well, maybe I feel ignored. They'll say, like, I feel ignored. Okay, let's talk about that, because then it can be a conversation that you can both share about how you feel when they're both, yourself and they are using their phones and screens. And having these small conversations, maybe while they're even looking at, right, the content of TikTok or whatever video on YouTube that they're watching. First of all, because it gives you an insight on what they're actually watching, right? What are the videos and types of videos that they like. But also because then through that, you can have conversations about, like, oh my gosh, I think we've been here for a while. Let's go and do something else, right? And helping them build that awareness. And of course, using empathy and compassion to connect with them so that they do feel safe, right? To keep that channel of communication going. So in order to do that, I think it's really important for us to also address talking with them and not so much at them, right? Sometimes we maybe put aside our experience, maybe it wasn't positive, maybe it was great, but as our experience as a teen and what they might be experiencing, right, is so different that it feels like, why can't they just do what I'm telling them, right? Like, why can't they just listen to me and do as I say, right? And so that can be more talking with them and not, sorry, at them and not with them, right? Having conversations is asking more questions and having less of a lecture, right, with them. I think that's really key, because then it gets them thinking, like, oh, my mom wants to hear more about, why it is that maybe I'm really on the phone. Like, oh, my best friend's having a heartbreak or something, right? Oh, well, how's that going? How's it going helping that person? So all of those things just give you a chance to hear more about what their life is like, what's going on behind that screen, and also to help them feel like you're a part of their conversation, like someone that they can consult with while they're trying to address if there is an addiction, right? Or if they feel like they can't stop being on their phone. And then also, of course, being honest, right? Like sometimes I personally can say this, right? Like from my own experiences, I had to stop and think, wow, how much time am I spending on Netflix or whatever it is, right? Binging. And then thinking about, well, what happened this weekend with the kids, right? Or like turning back and like, wow, I really didn't get to do what I was hoping to do, right? So then when we have that awareness ourselves, we can also teach our kids, like, oh yeah, I noticed that I didn't get to do what I wanted. Did you notice anything? Like, were you planning on doing something else? Having those types of conversations can help them feel like we're human too, right? And then they can approach us for strategies to come up with ideas and to figure out how to get better with their time on the screen. And then if we are really genuinely concerned, right, expressing those concerns, really focusing on in a moment where we can demonstrate our love and compassion for them and support so that they can open up, right? Maybe not in that moment, you're maybe planting seeds, but maybe later on they'll say, hey, can we go for a car ride? I need to talk to you about something. Or can we, whatever it is, right? Like, can we go for a walk? Sometimes that's also another thing, right? So having those bigger conversations won't necessarily happen like tonight, you're going to hang up and go have them, right? But it's really having those smaller steps in that direction to build up to having a safer space that can really help them recognize that family life is important. Let's consider how much screen time am I using. Maybe I really do need to put my phone down, right? So being intentional with our time, that's really what we're teaching them. And that's something that a lot of us as adults, sometimes we need reminders around. So setting up goals, right? Let's set up some goals. Focusing, first of all, on one thing at a time is really important. I think, unfortunately, we're almost running out of time. I'm noticing the time. I want to make sure everyone has a chance to ask any questions that they might have. But I will just briefly say that, having some kind of code of conduct, something as easy as, hey, we're not going to have our phone at the table for dinner. Or tonight we're going to all put our phones downstairs or away from our bedrooms and let them charge there so everyone's ready to go the next day, right? Something like that. Coming up with something that everyone's willing to try just to kind of disconnect from being on the phone as much. But definitely taking baby steps, not trying to do so much all at once. So one or two things at a time will make a difference, and then you can kind of build on that. And maybe finding things that you can do that are going to take their place, right? Instead of right after dinner going on your phone, let's go right after dinner, let's go for a walk with a dog, walk with a family, and having that time to connect, right, in person and socially, just checking in with each other, or maybe just even not doing much, just walking, right? Maybe that starting at that point, just having that shared experience with your child. And then also finding an incentive or something that motivates everyone, so that they can also feel a part of, hey, we all managed to decrease our screen time X amount of hours. Let's do something fun this weekend together, right? And if you do set up consequences, right? Like, oh, we went over, we're going to have to do something different, right? Whatever it is that you choose to make a consequence, then really following through is really important, because we don't want them to get confused with our empathy and compassion for no limits, no discipline. Oh, I'm just going to talk to my mom and maybe she'll let me get away with it this time. It's not helping them either to keep themselves accountable. So some specific strategies, I kind of have talked a lot about this, but some of the things that you can really do also are deleting the app. Whatever app it is that's bothering or that's really kind of engaging your child more than you would like, excuse me, you definitely want to delete it. Just get rid of it. If it's not there, it's going to make it harder for them to get access to it again. Or talk about it like, hey, okay, we noticed that Instagram is the one that you're using the most. Let's just get rid of it. Or Facebook, right? Although Facebook is for old people, apparently. So, like we said, setting up any screen-free zones. And then also modeling these habits as much as possible. And I did add a couple of things. There are tools out there that help with self-care or keeping you with your goals. And there's a really cute one called Finch, which I won't say, one of my children actually mentioned it to me and she really uses it. But I think it's really helpful because then the kids are encouraging themselves to like go for a walk instead of being on their phone, or being like, hey mom, take away my phone if it's 4 o'clock because I need to stop and I need to focus on my homework, right? We want them to get to that point. Sometimes there are tools that are helpful for that. And Finch, I think, is one of them. You can also create an ethical manual with your kid. And I do include the link to this particular example. So you'll be able to see that when you get the slides. But definitely, we want them to prioritize their self-care. We need to prioritize our self-care so that we can help them in a most calm state, right? Creating that safe space. Getting them the support. If you see that they have signs of or symptoms of depression or anxiety, please, hopefully they feel comfortable enough talking to you about it so that they can talk to someone else about it. Because so many times kids are referred to us, but they're not ready. They won't be ready for whatever reason, right? Maybe they're so busy they don't want to talk about it because that's how they're kind of dealing with it. But hopefully if they're willing to get support with it, right? And the stigma hopefully changes, especially among their peers, of getting support and asking for help, then, making sure that they're able to get access to, whether it's through school, whether it's through your provider, through some avenue so that they get the support with someone that they care about. Sorry, not care about, but that they feel connected with, right? So that's really important because sometimes kids give up like, oh, I didn't like my therapist, so I'm going to give up. But, you don't do that with any other medical provider, like with your doctor or with your dentist. If you don't like them, you find someone else, right? So same thing. We want to be able to help them understand that. And, if their goal is to go to some really great college or do something with their lives that is going to require a lot of focus, then we need to help them establish that understanding of like doing less of this is going to help you do more of this, right? And more of your schoolwork, more of your, being able to find extracurricular activities that you enjoy versus being on your phone, right? That can't go on your applications for college. So these are some of the links that I mentioned for the book. for the ethics manual that you can create with your teen. There's a few articles included as well and some information that I think can help you. There's a screen-free week that gets celebrated every year. I think this year's passed already, so next year it's going to be in May. So definitely consider doing that with your family. And this is my contact information. I really do apologize for the technical issues that we were having at first. But if you have any further questions or really want to dive a little deeper into your family situation, I highly encourage you to call me. You can call that the high school. That's actually the Malibu High School number, and our extension is 74141. You can also, for anything else, reach me at the 424 number that you see on the screen. You can also email me. And if you are interested in getting any more information about our services, you can also go on our website. Some links about our services, and I'm just going to go back to that last screen. And hopefully you will get a copy of these slides, so you don't have to rush to write anything down. Most of you should have my contact information already.